Greetings, beautiful earthlings. It is I, Christina, here at Fit and Bendy in Los Angeles, and today's workout is a super gentle, yummy workout to balance the muscles in the pelvis and to help your hips feel relaxed and open. So we're doing some strengthening and some stretching. All you need is a wall and a yoga block, and we're going to start standing. So let's get to it. We're going to start by finding our pelvic alignment, and we can do this by seeing where the bones are in our pelvis. So I'm going to start by looking down at my feet. I want to make my feet even, and then I'm going to put my fingers on my hip bones, these two bones that stick out in the front of our pelvis there. And I want to figure out where they are. Now, if I'm not paying attention, this right one tends to sneak back behind the left one. So I want to use a little bit of my right glute to push that hip forward so now they're straight across. And then I'm going to check in with my pubic bone, which is the bone at the bottom of the pelvis right here in the front. So I can feel where those bones are. And that one for me tends to sit a little bit behind the other two hip bones. So I'm going to lift it forward. So what you need to do to bring your hips into alignment may be different than what I'm doing, but you check in with those bones, and ideally what you want is that those bones are as flat as possible in order to reinforce having a good alignment for your pelvis. So I want my feet to be right under my hips in that nice alignment. And I'm going to stand all the way on one square so I'm not losing my balance. And from here, I'm going to start to bring my right knee forward and back down. And I'm trying to do that without changing my pelvic alignment at all. So what tends to happen as we shift our weight onto one leg is a sort of a lean and a hip hike. And this is going to obviously throw off our pelvic alignment. It's going to cause us to use muscles for this lifting this leg that are not optimal. So in order to do this, we really have to work the outside butt, the back butt, and the foot of this left standing leg. And as I'm lifting this right leg, I'm trying to find my psoas muscle. So if you have your notifications on, you'll see that later this month, I am dropping a video on hip flexors where you're going to learn all about your hip flexor alignment and how to find your psoas. That one's coming out next month too. So if you watch those videos, you can start to understand that there are many different muscles that you can use to lift your knee, and some of them are better for this than others. And we're trying to find the psoas muscle and the iliacus, which are really the best muscles for lifting this. And you can feel those attaching in the groin and going up through the center of your body to attach to your spine. And when we lift with those muscles, nothing else moves. I can lift my knee all by itself. So your knee may not come up super duper high, because at a certain point, if I want to get higher, I have to do this weird thing where I start to use a little bit more of my outer hip flexors, which is not what I want. So I'm trying to keep my knee only as high as it can go without anything else moving. And now let's just go ahead and hold that knee up, and you should be able to feel those hip flexor muscles working. And we're going to strengthen them a little by just doing some happy little pulses here, right? And I'm trying to keep my shoulders right over my hips. I'm not leaning away, I'm not doing anything weird. I don't know, maybe I'm doing something weird. And if you have a little extra brain space, you can think about shifting the weight in your standing leg a little bit further forward into the ball of that foot to open up the front of this hip. And that's just a little bonus thing that you can do. And we're going to do 3, 2, 1. Hopefully you're feeling that muscle. If you're not, you can push down on your thigh slightly to make it have to work even harder. We're just going to do a couple of ankle circles, and this is mostly just a little bit of misdirection, putting your brain space into your ankle instead of your hip, which is probably getting tired. Switch directions for 3, 2, 1, and put it down. And now that hip flexor feels like, oh, now I know a little bit about how to shorten. Let's do the same thing for the other side. So now I'm going to put my weight into that right leg. I can feel my toes are spread out nice around that leg. The leg's straight, butt muscles are working. Hands on my hips. I'm dropping that left sit bone down towards the floor as I bring that left knee up and forward. So at the beginning, I'm maybe not even bringing my toe up off the floor. And if this is where you are, just working on being able to do this without leaning and without shifting your hips, this is great. You can even put your fingertips lightly on the wall next to you just to make sure that you have your balance. And that's okay too. Try not to death grip it or anything. But if that helps you feel more balanced, absolutely go for it. And as that hip flexor starts to get a little bit more engaged and you can feel it, you can start to float that knee up a little higher. Now for me, the left side's a little bit more challenging. Balance is a little bit more challenging. maybe the knee doesn't go as high, and you might have the same thing, like a difference right to left. And that's part of what we're feeling for here, is to balance out our hips by noticing which side is a little easier for us to do, which side is a little harder, and giving a little extra love to the side that needs it, spending a little extra time on it. Let's do 2 more of these lift and lowers. And I'm shifting my weight forward if I have the brain space for it on that standing leg, opening up the front of the right hip. And now I'm going to hold that left knee up and I'm going to do my happy little pulses, right? So I'm really trying to keep my shoulders over my hips, drop my left sit bone down towards the floor, tuck my pelvis under to drive that knee up, using my right butt. Your right butt should be like, really working to help to open up that hip and drive the opposite knee up higher. And we're going to hold it up, maybe push down slightly if you want that extra challenge. If not, don't have to. You can even slightly support your thigh with your hands to try to get it to lift up higher if you feel like your hip flexors are dying. Let's do a couple of those big ankle circles here. Good. And switch directions. Ooh, there's a little bit more out of that left hip flexor. Sometimes you'll find as you're holding it, the hip flexor will be like, okay, I'll go a little further. Good. And put it down, shake it out. So now both of my hip flexors are saying, wow, that was very exciting. And now we're going to use those hip flexors together with our glutes to do some squats, because hip flexors have to shorten when you do a squat. And if you can't get your hip flexors to shorten, it's going to mess up your squat. So let's put our feet a little bit wider than hip width apart and try to put your feet parallel. I know a lot of people like to do squats with their feet turned out. It's going to kind of mess things up for you in this instance. We want to try to keep the feet as parallel as possible, even if it means you don't go down as far. You can clasp your hands in front of you to start. Press your feet out. Imagine you've got 2 walls on either side of you and you're pushing them away from you using your side butt. And then I'm getting a little bit of external rotation in my hips. So if you look at my feet, you can see the difference between not doing external rotation. And you can see there's just a little bit of a lift in the arch of my feet, and it's coming from my butt all the way down my legs into my feet. And I want to try to keep that engagement with the butt, keep that lift. And as I bend my knees, I'm thinking of the exercise I just did, bringing my knees up towards my chest. I'm imagining that I'm using my hip flexors to bring my knees up, even though what's happening is I'm lowering down. And let's just start with a nice little squat there. Still pushing my knees apart, still trying to find that little bit of external rotation, which is going to open my knees out over my midfoot to pinky toe. And let's just do a couple more of those. Little bend down and come up. And for those of you who are, having a pretty easy time of this, we can now start to go a little bit deeper. Our goal is to drop that butt down towards the floor, keeping the body vertical and back up. Now, if your butt doesn't get all the way down today, that's okay. Just go as far down as you can. But one of the things that's really going to help you is feeling those hip flexors working. I'm imagining that I'm lifting my knees to my armpits rather than dropping my armpits to my knees. And that's going to help these hip flexors shorten. Because if my hip flexors don't shorten when I drop down, right, then I'm going to end up with this sort of hunchy spine, what's called in weightlifting butt wink, which is really funny to me. Obviously, that's not what a nice squat is going to look or feel like. So I'm trying to shorten here as I drop down, pushing those knees out, pushing those feet away from each other, and one more time back up. Now, if you want to make it a little bit more challenging, you can interlace your hands behind your head. And if you do your squat like that, it's just shifting your gravity back a little bit further, which is going to make your hip flexors have to work a little bit harder, make your ankles have to work a little bit harder to keep you from pitching over backwards. So we can do 2 more just like this. And last one, keeping that body vertical, and press the feet down to come back up and shake it out. So now that we've really worked on getting that engagement through the glutes and hip flexors, let's do a little bit of stretching before we take it to the floor. So I'm going to step out with my right foot facing it directly ahead, and I'm going to cross my left foot back behind it. So I could just square out to my left, but I'm going to rotate my body to the right as I bend my knees and sit down. I'm really squeezing my inner thighs together, and then I'm going to stick my right hip out and try to feel a nice stretch through the outside of that right hip. My inner thighs squeezing together are going to help keep my knees safe, and I can lift that right hand up and just get a little bit of a side bend, and there's a really nice stretch through the outside of the hip there. And let's do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to step out with my left foot, cross behind it with my right. So I could square out to this direction, but I am going to rotate. And as I rotate, I'm squeezing my inner thighs together. If this creates knee pain, try squeezing your inner thighs even more. If it still creates knee pain, don't do it. Not worth it. And I'm going to send that hip out to the left. And I'm going to try to feel that stretch through the outside of the left hip. Left arm comes up and over. And I'm finding that nice little side bend, opening up through the left side of the body. Maybe bend down just a little bit deeper, open it up a little bit more, and step back in and shake it out. And we would be remiss if we skipped stretching those front hip muscles, those hip flexors that we just worked so beautifully. So let's get into that a little bit. We are going to start with the right foot in front and step the left foot back. This doesn't have to be a super deep lunge. And both of my knees are bent, and I'm just going to start to shift my weight forward and back a little bit. Now, if this bothers your front knee, I highly recommend doing this with your front foot elevated to start. And that's going to take a little bit of the weight off that front leg and make it a little bit easier to build that strength there. What we really want to feel is that we can shift the weight forward without the knee hurting, and then we're going to find a deep tuck in the pelvis. And as soon as you flatten out that back, drop that tailbone down, lift that pubic bone up, you're going to start to feel more of a stretch through the front of this left hip. And this is where we're really going with this. We're going to float the arms out in front of us and try to straighten that back leg. And I'm using my left butt muscles to straighten my legs. So I'm not pushing with my quad. I'm trying to squeeze my butt while I tuck my pelvis. And then if you bend that front knee just a little bit more, you should hopefully feel a really lovely stretch in those same muscles that we were just working. Opening that up, getting ready for the floor work we're about to do. Let's hold for 3, 2, 1, and we're going to switch sides. Same thing on the other side. So now my left foot is in front, right foot in back. And please ignore some of the weird things that happen on my right foot and leg. I have a little arthritis in that right foot, old dancer problems. So I have to rotate it, and my balance kind of sucks on this side. So please don't do with your back leg what I'm doing with mine. And from here, again, we're going a little bit forward and back. And again, if this bothers your left knee, try elevating your foot. You can put it on a little stool, a stack of books, a low stair, whatever you have handy. And I'm trying to feel my weight shift forward so that my left leg is taking as much of my weight as possible. And that's going to allow my right hip to open up a little more. So I'm going to stop in that forward position. I am going to tuck my pelvis under, and I'm going to try to find that right butt and use it to straighten that back leg. Zombie those arms out in front of you, and feel how using that right butt to pull the back of your thigh backwards helps to open up the front of that right hip. Hopefully you can feel that deep stretch. Maybe pull yourself a little bit further forward, deepening the lunge into that left side. Hold for 3, 2, 1. Oh, feels so good on the hips. All right, friends, meet me on the floor with a yoga block and your mat. Before we go to the wall, let's give our hips a little bit of an extra warm up here on the floor. And you're just going to lay back down. Feel your feet coming in towards your butt. How close they get to your butt is going to depend person to person. But what you want to feel is you can press your feet down and pull them in towards your butt to kind of inspire the muscles on the backs of your legs. From here, you're going to flatten out your spine, start to lift the pubic bone up, and just get your tailbone up off the floor. So it's a small movement to start. I'm still pulling with the back of my legs, trying to send my knees out over my toes and then back down. And we're just going to do that a few times. And what we're trying to do here is wake up these muscles right where the butt and the thigh come together. It's the downstairs butt, or the thut, I believe, is the scientific name for it. And you want to feel how those muscles work to create openness through the front of the hips. So I'm trying to think about lengthening from my hip bones down to my knees, using this muscle to create that length. And you can gradually start to come up a little higher. But what we want to avoid is coming up so high that we start to drop the butt and get more into the back. So we're really working on feeling that thud work there to keep the openness through the hips. Let's just do a couple more. Come up as high as you feel comfortable with. Think about continuing to bring the weight forward into your toes. So I'm pressing my big toes down into the floor to get even a little bit more pull through the back of the legs. Last one, we're going to lift up and we're going to hold it there. Float the arms up into the air, and I'm going to try to press my solar plexus down as my knees shoot out, lengthening through the front of the thighs, through the front of the hips, and that downstairs butt is working hard. Let's hold it here for 3, 2, 1, and slowly roll back down. That's our little warm up for the wall. So let's go ahead and windshield wiper the knees back and forth. And while we're here, we're just going to do a little bit of relaxation for those muscles as well, which can help us once we get to the wall. So we're going to put our feet together and let our knees open out to the side and just let them sink down towards the floor. And what we can notice here is that you can get your knees closer to the floor if you arch your back, right? Your knees are going to go further down, but we want to try to keep our back in a neutral position. So maybe the knees won't be quite as far down. You can feel those muscles in the outside of the butt, outside of the hip working, and you can kind of rock back and forth to get those knees a little closer to the floor. Now, if this feels stressful for your hips to hold this weight, what you can do is take a couple of yoga blocks and just prop them. You can use pillows, whatever you want. Prop them underneath your thighs here and use that so your thighs have something to press into to help open up the inside of the hips. And having that little bit of extra support might be able to help the muscles relax, because ultimately what you want to feel is that the muscles through the pelvis and the inner thighs are able to just open up as those knees drop down towards the floor. And as you do this, if your hips start to get a little bit more relaxed, you want to go deeper, you can just move those blocks a little bit further out. If you need even more support, you can come up higher. Wherever your knees are, you want to have those blocks in a position to support the legs. If you don't need them and your hips are feeling comfortable in this position, you can just do some little rock side to sides. And the idea again is just to allow gravity to help you open up a little bit. And we're just going to hang out here for one more big breath and exhale. And then use those inner thighs and maybe a little bit of hands to bring your knees back in towards each other. And we are going to go to the wall. Here we are at the wall. You're about to find out why my wall has so many footprints on it even after I washed it. We are going to lay on our backs. And you want your hips to be at 90 degrees and your knees to be at 90 degrees with your feet parallel on the wall, hip width apart. And the idea in this position is that it is very relaxing and soothing. If you're having a hard time relaxing in this position, I advise you to put a strap around your knees and gently press your knees out into that strap. And that's going to help your hips relax a little bit more. In this position, let your butt sink into the floor, and we're going to gently press our feet into the wall as if we're trying to lightly stand on the wall. And we're just going to hang out here for a moment. And the idea about this position, like I said, is that this is one of the most soothing positions for our hips and our back. So it's just a really nice thing to do for your body. I like to do this if I'm having lower back pain or my hips are hurting. Being in this position can really help all those muscles relax. Gently press your feet into the wall as your hips sink down. And you can really feel how with the feet pressing into the wall, using the backs of the legs, the hips get to relax, these hip flexors, the lower back gets to relax. And you can really feel that your body can just sink down into the ground as your hips do that work. We're going to build on this foundation with the maximum relaxation in the hip flexors by pressing the feet into the wall, and then feel as if you're trying to slide your feet down the wall. So you're trying to bring your feet towards the floor. They're not going to go because they're pressing into the wall and you've got that friction. And then you're going to use that feeling to create a small tuck in your pelvis and lift your tailbone up. So this is really similar to the shoulder bridging that we did earlier, but now using the wall creates a whole other dimension. And then we're going to go back down. Now, as you're doing this, you can keep this movement really small. It's totally fine. The goal is that you can feel the work happening right in the hamstrings and the butt, and that the spine is super relaxed. I'm thinking of my spine as just being like a wet rope that's just dangling down off of my pelvis and relaxing down towards the floor. So all of the muscles in my lower back are really getting to relax here. If you decided to opt for that strap, that slight press of the legs out into the strap can facilitate this as well. The other area that should be really nice and relaxed here is the front of the hips. So as I'm going up here, I'm really using the backs of my legs, the front of my thighs. These muscles, if you poke at them, you want them to be pretty squishy. If you're having a hard time getting those muscles to relax, just hang out and don't come up. Just press the heels in and slide them down. Just hang out here until you can feel those muscles relax. And once you can get these back of the legs to really step up and do their job, then you can start to come up higher. And the higher you get, the harder your legs are working, obviously. Really work on keeping your hips even. Sometimes we'll have one leg that's way better at doing this than the other. And if you check out the version of this workout in my paid membership video club, link below, that was a terrible wink. Then we do a whole single leg sequence that's meant to balance out those imbalances that most of us have. So you can find that there. Let's just do a couple more of those. Again, gently pressing the feet into the wall, feeling like they're sliding down, feeling that work in the back of the legs. And on this last one, we're just going to lift up and hold it up. And I sometimes like to float my arms up in the air here. So I'm really thinking about pressing my solar plexus down, hollowing out my body, feeling that work in the back of the legs. And while we're holding up here, I'm going to tell you that this whole sequence that we're doing right now is really inspired by the work of the guys over at Integrated Kinetic Neurology. They are also linked below, and I love their work. I highly recommend following them, subscribing to their newsletter, and taking their courses. They've really given me a lot of juicy information, including the inspiration for this whole sequence we're doing right now. All right, I feel like we've probably hung out here long enough. Let's roll back down and relax and see if now your pelvis feels just a little heavier and like more relaxed. All right, if you have that strap on your knees, go ahead and take it off. And we're just gonna bring our legs all the way in to touch. So now I'm squeezing my inner thighs together, knees are touching, and we're gonna get into a little internal rotation. So I want to start by feeling where my internal rotator is. If I'm at my hip bone here, I'm gonna go a little down and out. That's that TFL. Feel free to check out the video on hip flexor anatomy if you're wondering what that muscle is. And I am just going to use that muscle to slide my foot out into internal rotation and maybe pick it up off the wall just a little bit at the end and bring it back in. Now, if you don't have a lot of internal rotation, that foot might not come up off the wall. That's okay. Just keep working at it. If you work at it, it will get better. Even if it gets better slowly, it's better than not getting better at all. And this internal rotation is really important if you like to do any kind of running or jumping. If you have tight hips, you will notice that mine isn't fantastic, and I could get a little shake at the end there. There it is. Ooh, shake, shake, shake. So this is something I like to work on a lot because it is not something at which I am naturally gifted. Let's do 3 more of these. This is also a really great movement for a lot of dancers. There's a lot of movement in dance that requires internal rotation, and you want that to be strong. So dancers, this is a great one for you. On this next one, let's lift it up. We're going to hold it there. Find that little shake if you can for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and slide it back in. Same thing on the left side. Left side. And here it goes. Oh, so sad on the left side. Now, one thing to look out for in this, if you have a side that's tight like I do, or both sides being tight, is the desire of the back to do the work. I'll show you what that would look like. So if I slide out and I'm like, oh, I could get a little bit more if I just use my back muscles, right? And then my hips shift and my back is working. And it looks like I'm doing internal rotation, but all I'm doing is moving my spine. So I'm going to try to not do that, even if my leg barely moves and it looks all shaky and sad. Because if I work at it here, it will gradually get better. Believe it or not, it has gotten better. It used to be worse. And we really want to feel that work right here in the TFL, so in the outside front of the hip. And again, if that foot doesn't lift up off the wall, no big deal. It has nothing to do with your worth as a human, whether or not you have full internal rotation. Let's do 3 more of these. And see if you can just get a little bit more engagement through that muscle every time. And last one, here we go, hold it. Think happy thoughts. Try not to use your back. I'm saying that to myself as much as to you. For 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and bring it back in. Well, you can't do internal rotation, then not do external rotation. I mean, you can, but who would want to? So now we're going to pick up our right leg. We're going to cross it over our left leg into a figure 4 stretch. And I'm pretty flexible here. This is a happy place for me. So I'm going to scoot my butt into the wall. The closer your butt is to the wall, the deeper this is going to feel in your hip. But you find what works for you. You can also move further away if you want. And now I'm going to try to find those muscles deep in my right butt that rotate my thigh bone away from me. So I'm moving my knee towards the wall. Now, again, this is a wonderful opportunity for me to try to use my back instead. That would look like me arching my back and tilting my pelvis, which looks like I'm getting my knee close to the wall, but now I'm no longer doing external rotation. I'm fiddling with my spine. So I'm going to try to keep my hips still, keep my spine still, not allowing my back to arch. And I'm just focusing on getting those butt muscles to work. And again, you can see I'm getting a wonderful little shake there. And that's because I am trying to get the maximum range of motion here. Generally, shaking happens in a muscle where it is not completely comfortable in that range. So as I get to my end range, that's the shortest that muscle feels comfortable getting, it's going to start to shake a little bit. And I'm trying to find those places where my body is challenged, right? And I'm trying to gradually use that work to increase the range in which my body is comfortable. If I do this enough, eventually that shaking will go away at this range and I'll be able to get a little bit deeper, and that range will then become available and comfortable for me. And that's really the whole goal of so much of this work, just increasing the places where our body feels comfortable and strong. All right, let's do 1 more of these. We're going to hold that knee away. And then we're going to find a little extra stretch, and we're going to get that extra stretch by arching our back. So I'm going to press my butt down into the floor and arch my back. I'm still pushing my knee away from me, and that just deepens the stretch of the glutes. The muscles that I'm squeezing are not my glutes. The muscles I'm squeezing are underneath my glutes. My glutes are getting a nice stretch right now. If this still feels like, hey, I could use a little more stretch, I can lift my left heel up, which is going to bring my leg in a little bit deeper. And bam, deeper stretch. If you're still bored, you can scoot your butt in even closer to the wall. And I really like this stretch so much more than pigeon. It's much safer for my knee. There's a lot of active component. It's a lot less pounding from gravity. And our last trick here, I'm just going to slide my legs over to the left just a little bit. And all of a sudden that stretch has moved to the outside of my right glute. And it feels really actually quite divine. I'm getting that arch in my back. Deep breath in here. Enjoy that outer hip stretch. Kind of mirrors some of the outer hip stretches we did earlier. And then back to center. Drop a heel down. Uncross the leg. Same thing on the other side. Let's cross that leg over. Figure 4 stretch. All right. I'm putting my hands on my hip bones to keep myself honest and finding that external rotation. So my left leg is not as good at internal rotation. It's better at external rotation. You might have the opposite. You might have the same. Everybody's different. It's so magical. So I'm trying to find those deep butt muscles, trying to make sure that my spine isn't moving. I just did all that wonderful work to relax my spine. Can I keep my spine relaxed and do this movement at the same time? What a wonderful magic trick. I'm thinking about lengthening my thigh bone out of the hip socket here. So I want to really think about getting my legs separate from the hips. So the hips are still and the legs are moving. And that kind of separation is a big part of what helps us create more flexibility in our bodies. And we're going to stop with that knee pulsed away from us, and let's find the stretch. So a little arch in the spine, pressing that butt down into the floor. You should be able to feel that left butt saying, hello. And if that's still not enough juice for you, go ahead and pick that right heel up off the wall. And there is that wonderful deep butt stretch. Again, you always have the option of scooching your butt closer in towards the wall if that sounds nice to you, if you want it to go even deeper. And let's just breathe here, still trying to bring that left knee a little closer to the wall. And if you want some extra yum-yums, go ahead and slide the whole apparatus to the right. I'm keeping my left butt solid on the floor, so I'm not letting my pelvis twist. I'm just moving my leg in the hip socket to try to get this deep, yummy outer hip stretch here. And that's the outside of the butt working, the outside of the gluteus maximus. Oh, it just feels so good. These are muscles that get very tight from sitting, just from life, stress. All right, one more big breath here. Yum. And let's move that back into center. And I'm going to uncross that left leg, both feet flat on the wall. And I'm just going to let both legs open out to a nice, happy frog. Now, if this does not feel comfortable for your pelvis, I highly recommend taking a couple pillows or yoga blocks and putting them under your knees so that your thighs are supported. You have something to rest your thighs on, because the idea here is that you want your inner thighs and your pelvic muscles that we've just been working to relax as much as possible. And then I'm going to put my hands gently underneath my knees, and I'm just going to do a little rock back and forth here. A little rock back and forth. And I'm using my hands to make that happen. And again, the idea is relaxation. Relaxation of the hip muscles. Letting that pelvis sink down into the floor. I'm letting there be a little bit of arch in my back. And then I'm going to press both feet into the wall. And this is a recreation of basically like a plie or a sumo squat, right? So I'm trying to feel the backs of my legs work and feel how the backs of my legs can work. My spine can be straight and my hips can be relaxed. And it's easier to feel that here than it is standing up because gravity is being a lot less mean. And then you can also press your thighs down into your hands. If you have the blocks, you can just press down into the blocks and feel how that outside butt works to create even more stretching and openness through the inner thighs. And we're going to hang out here and breathe. Relax that pelvis. Just a little bit of work in the backs of the thighs and the outside butt. For 3, 2, 1, then maybe the feet can come out a little bit further. The legs can open a little more. If you have blocks, just scoot them out closer to your knees. So your knees can get a little closer to the floor. And we're going to do the same thing. Press down into the hands, feet pressing into the wall. Listening to the train go by outside. For 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And use your hands to bring those legs back in together. Last stretch, we're going to build on that frog by scooting our butt all the way in towards the wall. If you're super tight, you might want to create a little bit of space between your butt and the wall. But this is the ultimate goal, is to get the butt touching the wall. We're here in our hamstring stretch. And then I'm going to point my toes, externally rotate my feet, and just let my legs open out to straddle. So now I am stretching the same muscles that I did. It's just with a knee straight, it's going to feel a little bit different. Again, option to put it something to support your thighs. You could just put your hands here for that little bit of support. And I'm going to flex my feet, bend my knees, dig my heels into the wall, bring those knees in towards my shoulders just a little bit, and then straighten them out, point the toes. And as you do this movement, you might find that your legs sink down a little closer to the floor every time. You might not. Everybody's different. All of these movements are just suggestions for you and your body to try out and see what works for you and what doesn't. If you have any questions, you can always pop them in the comments below. I love questions. It makes me think of new things. Let's do 2 more of these bending and straightenings. And last one. Go ahead and straighten those legs out. And now we're going to gently squeeze our hamstrings to push the heels, push the backs, the legs, backs of the knees into the wall. And think about that pelvis sinking down. Maybe find those outside butt muscles again to push your legs down towards the floor. See if they'll go a little bit further out to the side. Hold for 3, 2, 1. Now to come out of this, we want to keep this level of relaxation as you come out. So I'm going to soften my knees and I'm going to take my hands and I'm going to pick a leg and I'm going to use my hand to bring that leg up and over, haul it over. So there's a little bit of help from the leg, but I'm really trying to use my hand to help, and I'm just going to roll over onto my side, and I'm nice and heavy. My pelvis is relaxed. My hips are relaxed. You can take your time to come up to sitting here. You don't have to come up. You can still just lay there. Just lay there. You look adorable. Thank you, hips. Thank you, lower back. Thank you, pelvis. Hopefully that made you feel really nice and open and gooey and loose. We do have a second part to this series. So if you haven't hit your notification button, please do that because it's coming out in a couple of weeks. And that one is going to go a little bit deeper into strength and flexibility. We also have a couple of videos about hip anatomy, how to find your psoas, what your hip flexors are. And that's going to be super helpful to help you visualize what's going on in your pelvis during this exercise. So check that out as well. Thank you so much for watching. I truly adore you. Let me know if you have any questions, and happy bendings. Mwah.